All right, hello and welcome to this Friday afternoon, dropping on Monday edition of the American Soccer Crash Course. I'm Christian Lee, here with Lodge Dills.
How do you do?
And our casual fan of the day, Jack Koch. We're going to get to Jack's soccer introduction in a second. Before we do that, just wanted to say if you're a fan of the pod, would really appreciate if you like or rate on Spotify rather. Check us out on Apple Podcasts as well. And if you're liking it, throw us a subscription on YouTube. That's really where I would recommend watching our podcast, just because we kind of throw in some visual aids, some pictures, and GIFs of these guys we're talking about. So that would be my recommended consumption route, I would say. To introduce our casual fan of the day, Jack Koch drove many miles to be here today just to support the pod. Massive fan. Jack, what does your soccer literacy look like? What's your soccer bio, would you say?
So I'd say limited soccer knowledge. I played Little League. From there,
Is it called Little League?
Rec soccer.
Bay Men's Club.
Not to put you on blast.
Bay Village Men's Club soccer.
Right, gotcha.
To be correct.
Born and bred.
Anyway, I've been involved in our group chat for a long time now, and just seeing the general banter that goes on, and as games go along on the weekends, I've observed that from a high level. Mm-hmm. So I'd say my knowledge as it stands with, the leagues around the world is fairly limited. I did have a stretch of FIFA play with both of you over the course of the past few years, especially during COVID. I get to know traits of a lot of the players, but as far as standings go right now, it has been a while for me. So
I would say you're already doing enough as a casual fan. That's all.
Pretty much that's all we're asking for. That's perfect.
I mean, I know for a fact that you've served your time in a group chat with like nine dudes where you were the lone non-soccer fan. So always taking your opportunity to talk about other sports as it came about, but didn't come very often. So we all respect the grind there. To get into, and you're just agent of chaos today. You're really playing the role of the audience member, the person at home who
shake things up, yeah.
Exactly, might be frustrated with Lodge and I talking in the weeds too much. So, So to get to our agenda for the episode today, we're going to talk about our main man of the day, Weston McKennie. Just a reminder, we're going to be going through the 11 starters that we think are going to play at the World Cup in only one short month. So he's one of those guys. We're going to introduce you to him. We're going to go through some rapid-fire vocab for Jack. He's going to have to think on his feet here. We're going to get to today's big thing, which is last week we talked about American players getting to Europe. This one's going to be about staying power and kind of making the right moves in these players' careers. Finally, we're going to wrap things up with a little gambling preview on the Champions League.
Not that we endorse gambling for the fourth time. I'd like
bet
to
responsibly, of course.
Yeah.
Yes, bet responsibly.
Yeah.
We don't have a sponsor at this point, but do what you will. We have a special Champions League consultant who came in this week. He'll be dropping in, and then finally we'll probably leave you with some homework of some kind. So there was major history on the crash course today. The player that we're talking about, Weston McKennie, actually scored on this Friday. So unique moment.
Was it due to us talking about him? We don't know. Maybe.
There's some correlation. Correlation is not causation, I once was told, but hard to say. Either way, we're going to introduce you to Weston. Show you a clip here in a second from the Amazon series All or Nothing. If you're familiar, I know that they've done a few sports. They did one where Weston McKennie was included. Before we do that, just wanted to introduce the fourth member of our crew today. He's going to be tag teaming it with me, Brian Koscianski. He's our resident expert on soccer as well, and also drove many miles to be here. So, without further ado, we're going to get into those clips. I'm going to bounce off, and yeah.
Wes, è stata una partita molto importante. No, tranquillo, faccio and then I translate for you. È stata una partita molto importante. How important could be this game after yesterday's results?
Surprisingly, I actually understood the Italian part.
Last night against El Salvador was Weston McKennie's most helpful performance since at least the Stretcher Children game over the summer. He's helpful, but he's also just courteous all around. After he gets flung to the ground, moments later, he's going to apologize for accidentally stepping on that guy's foot. When Tyler Adams yells at this gentleman, Weston just makes sure there aren't any hard feelings. And of course, he's always going to be best in medical situations. He's first on the scene to help the goalkeeper. He's also by far the last on the scene. Everyone else is way back getting ready to play. Weston's going to stick around just to make sure he gets safely back on his feet.
If I don't eat well, it's impossible to play.
To throw a little bit like a cookie or like a brownie or a burger or something in there like this, then I'm like, okay.
Pizza?
Pizza? Yeah. I love it, yeah. Do you know what ranch dressing is? Ranch?
No, I never
It's a white sauce. So it's normally for salad. If you put the sauce on the pizza. What is he doing?
I'm scared about American dressing. No, we use just olive oil, nothing more.
It's amazing.
Do you like coffee? No. Italian coffee, no?
If I drink espresso, I shit myself. Really? Yeah.
Tapping in Brian Koscianski. Brian, do you want to tell the pod a little bit about your experience with soccer?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thanks for having me, Christian Lodge. Great to be here. So my history with football is grew up playing soccer, played my whole life, tested out some other sports, but soccer's definitely my bread and butter, and definitely the sport that I still value the most to this day. I'm a pretty avid fan of Premier League, Champions League, and I'm a big Barcelona guy as well. Not a huge MLS guy, but I do pay attention to the crew a little bit, just because the Columbus crew, that is, just because some of my friends are some diehards growing up in Columbus.
Seems like you'll fit in quite perfectly with us. Yeah, we're MLS truthers.
But, I mean, yeah, I still play a little bit to this day. But, yeah, I mean, there isn't a sport that I'd rather come on a podcast to talk about, so
Perfect.
Should be a good one.
Yeah. All right. So the clip we just watched, Jack. Pizza, or I should say ranch on pizza. And that was the biggest cultural difference between those two. What were your first impressions? Was it like, that's a little weird that you're hearing that's uncomfortable? Or like, I mean, from a full Italian person, he was pretty pissed, it seemed like at the end.
Right. I mean, I could kind of sympathize with Chiellini in that clip, mainly because I had the opportunity to go to Italy for the first time this past summer, and there was absolutely no ranch dressing in sight. So just based on that, also I'm not myself a huge ranch on pizza type person. Mm-hmm. I've always kind of appreciated pizza for what it is. It doesn't really need that, too many enhancements in that regard. So
it was a bit sacrilege. Let's be truthful here. Yeah, it wasn't great.
I'm just going to jump in and say that the fact that we're saying ranch on pizza is a little bothersome to me. I'm a huge ranch supporter, and so I can't really eat pizza without ranch.
I would say if you're going the barbecue, barbecue chicken pizza route, then it's acceptable.
Sure. Okay. Sure. I don't think they're having that in Italy, though.
Yeah, definitely not. But I'd say it's acceptable. Buffalo ranch.
Sure.
But other than that,
different
not my thing,
folks. Yeah. All right. So getting into the meat of today, we're going to be talking about one of the main men on this team, central midfielder Weston McKennie. Specifically, we're going to continue to use Christian Pulisic, if you turned into the last episode, as a linchpin to kind of refer back to him, because so much of what Weston McKennie has done in his career has been centered around Pulisic being the trailblazer, as far as going into Europe at such a young age, as far as coming into the national team and starting to have a leadership role. That was all kind of done by Pulisic first, and he's kind of the first follower in this squad. So first off, Brian and I are just going to kind of go back and forth with some quick highlights of his career. Number one, just to tell you a little bit about the guy, 24 years old, outside of Dallas, Texas. He played for the FC Dallas Soccer Academy growing up, which is an MLS soccer academy. Generally regarded as our second best player, as I mentioned. That's probably up for debate. We're not going to talk about that right now. But specifically right now, as you saw in the clip, he plays for Juventus, which is widely regarded as the number 1 team out of Italy. But yeah. Brian, do you want to tell him a little bit more about him?
Yeah, so just based on his position, he's a central midfielder, box to box, people would describe him as, and that's a term that's used to describe center mids that are not too offensive, not too defensive, but can do a little bit of both, a lot of both, are probably the most well-rounded players on the pitch.
Sure.
And yeah, I mean, in terms of basketball, I guess you can compare that to like a small forward. Yeah, it does a little bit of everything, and so he definitely offers a lot of presence on corners and set pieces. I found out today that he scored a header, so he definitely brings that to the table that could help us. But yeah, I mean, I definitely rate him as a player, and I probably would say he is our second best player for the national team. But yeah, he's just a physical boss in the midfield, and I love to watch him play when I get the chance. But unfortunately, I'm not really throwing on too many Juventus games. Yeah. But yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, Italian league's a little bit more difficult to watch than the Premier League, some of the players that we'll be talking about here. But just to piggyback off what Brian had been talking about, he's almost half MMA in that he's very much a physical presence in the game. I mean, one thing that definitely comes to mind is his presence against Mexico when he was just sitting there beating up anybody that came into his way. In a lot of different midfields and a lot of different places across, the international stage, you need somebody that can just be a bruiser, who's okay taking the fouls, who's okay taking, the brunt of all the negative stuff coming into the game. Somebody who can just absorb all that, and he does a very fantastic job at doing that. Additionally, if he were to watch this episode, which definitely wouldn't be, but if he were to be watching that, or the last one that we watched, hearing that Pulisic was the legend, he would be a little bit slighted. He definitely has been the right-hand man at every single point, almost like Batman and Robin. You definitely don't hear about Robin, but without him, Batman's not going to be Batman. So I think in that way, he definitely has some street cred for what he's done for the team.
He's definitely one of Americans to watch overseas. Like Pulisic, he's been in Europe for a little bit now. Moved to Germany when he was about 6 years old, living there for a couple years.
Military brat, I want to say?
Something over
like
there.
that. Yeah, he was a military brat growing up.
But yeah, he was exposed to European soccer from a young age. And then he moved on to work his way up through FC Dallas's academy. And then thankfully he's back over in Europe. Has been facing a little bit of injury troubles lately, but it's good to see him back on the field and helping Juventus win some important games. So
yeah, just to kind of continue that, one person that I definitely compare him to is Kobe Bryant. One of the things that Kobe did as a young kid was growing up on military bases all across Europe. Weston McKennie was the exact same way, and the way that you kind of build relationships with people your age. Kobe, it was basketball. He was just always playing basketball. But with Weston, it was soccer. That was the international game. It was the international language. So many different people were, impressed with his skills. It was the way that he could make friends in different areas, become fast friends with whoever as he continued to move around. But yeah, just to continue on with his history, he actually did have a letter of intent to play at UVA, University of Virginia, for college soccer, but did in fact decide to go pro from the U.S. Dallas Academy, as we mentioned a couple times.
Yeah, and so like I said before, grew up in Germany and actually went from the MLS to FC Schalke, which is a pretty popular team in Germany. But yeah, so he was in Germany right next to Christian Pulisic, who was playing for Dortmund at the time. And they're actually considered pretty big rivals. And so a lot of the fans weren't very happy that Christian and Weston were getting along and hanging out as they were on rival teams.
Yeah. And as we mentioned, the story of Christian going from German, the Bundesliga, to the Premier League to play for Chelsea. Weston did eventually make the move to go to Juventus, as we saw in the clip earlier. But kind of as that was happening, one thing that the pod definitely wanted to bring up was a little bit of an intermediary that happened specifically. I think it was last November, last October, last November, when the U.S. was looking at playing national team qualifiers. Because we're such a young team, the qualifiers were played in Nashville. First off, young kids in Nashville, never going to work. That's just going to be terrible. That's just recipe for disaster. But continuing on, it was still a situation where he was going to be in a COVID bubble, and from a player at a young age, putting them in a bubble in Nashville is just 3 things that could totally go wrong. The first night, he broke the bubble by having somebody into his hotel room. That's strike 1. The second one was he actually left the bubble the night after to go to somebody else's hotel room. There's been a lot of rumors on who it was. We're not going to continue to talk about that. We're not going to bring up any names. Pulisic sister. But we're not going to bring up any names. But that actually blackballed him from the team for a little bit. A lot of the pundits were saying that he didn't deserve to be on this squad, that he had disrespected everybody. But since then, he's put his head down and he's worked hard, definitely to continue to be on the team. Has proven himself to be pretty valuable to the Juventus team, a struggling squad, albeit in the Italian league. But yeah, I would say that was a little bit of a turning point in his career. One of the things that you hear about a lot of these young players is they have a lot of high highs and a lot of low lows, as we talked about with Christian Pulisic too. So just something to throw in there. All right, so we threw a lot of different just history at here. Let's take a little bit of a break and let's go for a little bit of vocab. Jack, this is where you're going to come into play. Usually what we've been doing is a little bit of soccer vocab. And I think probably with your experience in our group chats, where we're talking a lot about soccer, you probably have picked up on quite a bit of it. So we're going to mix it up a little bit, and we're actually going to go on to Southern slang vocab in honor of Weston McKennie's Nashville blunder. So first off, cattywampus. Can you tell me what a cattywampus is?
A cattywampus.
Give it your best shot.
I don't know. I'm lost for words.
It's like everything's kind of out of whack. Everything's crazy, out of sync. It's like all cattywampus. Like everything's all mixed together. It's all messed up.
Okay.
Brian, you got one for him?
Yeah, we have one here. It's carry me. What would you say that is?
Carry me, 2 words? 1 word?
It's like
just carry me.
Carry me, yeah.
Carry me.
Can you carry me?
Help me out?
Sorta, yeah. We'll
No
give
way.
it to you. It's like pick me up, like swoop me.
Okay.
In our jargon. Yeah.
Okay.
Next, this should be one that you should get, and all of our viewers at home should probably get. Honky tonk.
Honky tonk?
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely heard it in a few country songs, but
Did you never make the trip to Nashville
no, I've never
as a budding young lad? No?
No.
No. Well, honky tonk is a country bar. And so they're always saying, take me to the honky tonk. Like, take me to the bar. Yeah. Brian?
Yeah, here's another one. If somebody says that dog won't hunt, what would that...
That dog won't hunt.
Yeah, what would you say that would mean?
That person just is lazy? I don't know. I don't know.
We'll count it partial. Yeah, it's a struggle. It's a bit of a struggle here, but you want to go ahead, Brian? What was it?
That meaning is that's not going to work out. So, I mean, kind of almost at it,
No,
but not really at
sort
all.
of.
But
I
not
didn't
really
have
at
it
all.
there.
Tie goes to the runner. Not really, but last one that we're going to go with here is give me some sugar. It's a softball right across the plate. I actually put it on a tee for you. Give me some sugar.
Give me some sugar.
Your grandma, you haven't seen your grandma in a while, and she says, come on, give me some sugar.
Give me a hug. Or something. That's
Yeah.
in context.
Right, yeah. Give me a hug, give me a kiss. You know,
Yeah.
It's very nice to see you. All right. Well, after that, it was tough, I'm not going to lie. But after that vocab, we're going to go back and tap in Christian. Take a quick break here. So.
All right.
Those were tough.
No idea.
Those were a little tough.
What was this? No, what was the first one? What was the first one?
Cattywampus.
Cattywampus? How the fuck am I supposed to know what a cattywampus?
All right, so thank you for bearing with us after our beer break. Those of you watching on YouTube, no free ads. I poured it into a glass.
Hams doesn't even sponsor anything.
We're not talking.
Their
We're not saying what
business
kind of
is
beer
dead.
I have. We're not talking about what kind of beer I'm drinking. So yeah, the big thing that we're going to be talking about on today's podcast is finding your level and how important that is for a young player and really any player in the international stage. So just to kind of set the scene for you, Weston McKennie played a year with one of Schalke's, the German team that we're talking about here, youth farm teams before breaking out as a regular into the main squad, the number one, the first team squad at 19. He played 3 years there, kind of honing his skills, taking some time to develop.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, like, all the while Pulisic has grabbed a bunch of the headlines, there's a reason I have a Pulisic jersey and not a McKennie jersey. McKennie's benefited from the spotlight and weight of U.S. soccer really not being on his back, despite the fact that they were pretty similar. And as much as that is a reflection on him, I think you got to give credit to his agents and his representation because they've put him in positions to succeed. And so getting to Europe is one thing. I bring up F1 a lot, but I know there's a saying in F1. It's like getting into F1 is one thing, staying is a completely different thing. Right. It's the same exact thing for soccer, and especially when you're in Europe and the competition is so fierce. So the ultimate balance that these players are trying to strike is playing time, getting on the field, and like getting exposure, but also surrounding yourself with good players because you can't do it by yourself. Being around good players means you're not fighting for relegation. You don't have that stress on you. It means you can play and combine with those players nicely and like develop your game. So for these young players, these young Americans moving to Europe, it's all about towing that line. And Weston McKennie is the perfect example of towing that line. And to really illustrate that, I actually kind of want to just bring up some bad examples. So maybe it's harsh to say this about Pulisic, but I would say Pulisic, despite all those moments that we listed in the last episode, he hasn't really ever had like an entire season where he was the guy. He's been at 2 clubs, Dortmund, when he was younger. I think he could thrive there now, but when he was younger, it was always a tough position for him to be in terms of getting playing time. Granted, yeah, he was younger, so it wasn't as big of a deal. And then once he made that move to Chelsea, we talked about it. He was actually coming off being benched at Dortmund, so it's kind of a little bit of a surprise that he decided to actually take it up a level. And somewhat predictably, it's sometimes gone well, but sometimes been really tough. And even if he just played bad a couple times, he got kind of put at the bottom of the deck, so to speak. So he's kind of an example of maybe being too ambitious with what you're trying to do. To use another U.S. player that would illustrate the opposite would be like going to a place that maybe you are predicted to succeed at, but the players surrounding you.
So Pepe is what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm getting to Ricardo Pepe, who's also in the U.S. men's national team. But his story is basically, and we're going to get to a full episode on him as well as we discuss strikers. But his story is basically he did really well in MLS. He was 18 years old, and rather than continue in MLS and see like if he could really build up equity there, he decided, all right, I want to cash in right now. I want to go get a big contract in Europe, and so he actually went to Germany to this club Augsburg, and they were saying like the bottom half of the Bundesliga, and everyone was saying, oh, this is a great move. He's definitely going to get playing time. So this is a great thing. He'll be on the field or whatever. Yeah. And as it turned out, he was getting playing time, but because he just...
I think the whole argument that you're trying to make is quality over quantity, or quantity over quality, which is better.
Yeah,
and I think the two guys have shown the exact polar opposite. So when you're talking about Pulisic, he made the change for quantity, or made the change for quality,
right,
at the expense of quantity. Where he was possibly getting it at Dortmund or would have been on the track to. Pepe went for quantity. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for him, and now he's at a different squad. We'll be talking about that, as Christian said. But it's really difficult for these young kids to come in and try to find a mix of it. It's incredibly difficult.
And the Pepe thing was ironic, right? Because he came in for the sake of quantity and in the sense of playing time. But because he didn't have the teammates around him, he started to really taper off. And in his place came like veterans who were more used to the idea of playing with players that weren't as skilled and whatnot. So it so happened that Pepe's situation failed. And so Yeah, and just to like use an analogy for Ricardo Pepi, you can almost think of like what is actively happening to Justin Fields, where like he's good, he's their guy, and in a sense, but the pieces aren't around him. So it's very much like an NFL quarterback, where like if they don't keep that confidence through the early years, they can get really beat up very quickly and kind of just put right into irrelevance. Sadly,
Yeah.
so. Yeah, so to use Weston McKennie, I think he's the complete opposite of that. So as we talked about, he got to Schalke and he played 3 years where he was developing. He actually got lots of starts in Germany and in the Champions League, which we're going to talk about in 5 minutes or so. But he was at Schalke, he was comfortable, and then the wheels started to fall off at Schalke. They started to make some bad moves in terms of their player acquisition, and they really started to kind of slide down the ranks as far as their performances were going. And McKennie's like awesome agents looked around and were like, let's get out of here. So they pulled off kind of a shock move to Juventus, which is one of the biggest clubs in all of Europe. For those of you who don't know, Juventus actually at the time when McKennie got there was Cristiano Ronaldo's club. So McKennie kind of like showed him some American ways. Ronaldo would call him Texas boy and all this stuff. So they were really like hitting it off. And so really, what really surprised everyone was like, they did not think that he was going to get any playing time at a club as big as Juventus. And he went on to really shock everyone. And I would say he's done well there. You know, even if it hasn't always been awesome, even if he's gotten flack from fans from time to time, he's been consistently playing. Right. He started today, went 70 minutes, scored a goal, created some great chances. Like in a much better way than Pulisic, his career has been stable in a way that Pulisic would be dying for.
Right.
And so that's something that he's done like exceptionally well at Juventus.
So was the playing time right from the jump? Was it a gradual? You know, he got more time as he played more games with the team, or was it immediately like, you know, he was qualified to have a good amount of playing time?
Yeah. So in the Juventus team, there's usually quite a few different midfielders coming in and out. And so what that does is give a lot of different opportunities to a lot of people that wouldn't get it in a lot of other squads. Usually there's teams that have midfields that are just like mainstays. Like you're going to see these guys week in, week out. Juventus is very different in that they play a lot more midfielders, and so they have to do a lot more squad rotation. So he was getting first team minutes pretty early on. I wouldn't say that they were necessarily as much as he's getting now. It was definitely gradual, as you had mentioned.
Okay.
Yeah, nail on the head there, Lodge. So Jack, what's the Champions League?
So from my experience, you know, just listening to the group chat, the Champions League is teams from countries in Europe, ranging from Spain, Italy, England, and there's, you know, a specific league for the teams, and they need to qualify for that league. Is there anything?
I mean, that's pretty well said.
That's pretty much nailed on.
Put you right on the spot. Yeah. So like the Champions League, how it works is, as Lodge we've discussed, like the domestic leagues here. But with the Champions League, you really pull from all of those domestic leagues. So say the top 4 teams in the Premier League, are gonna qualify for next year's Champions League, and then that kind of trickles down to the rest of Europe. So like the top 4 teams in Spain are going to go, and they're all going to like come together and be in different groups. So it kind of offers this atmosphere where fans from England get to travel to the game in Spain, and there's even more obscure countries. Like the best team in the Czech Republic is going to get a shot at playing like Barcelona, and that's like a huge deal.
And one thing to mention is that based on the quality of the level of the actual league in that country, they get more spots. So when you're talking about the Big Five, we have 4 teams from England, 4 teams from, I think, Spain, 4 teams from
Italy gets like 3 or 4. Yeah,
Italy gets 3 or 4. Germany gets 3 or 4, and then it tapers off, and they start to go into more qualification games. So they might have to play other teams to get into the specific Champions League. But it turns into a format of 32 teams total, a group stage, and then you go into specifically the round of 16, quarterfinals, knockouts, and the final. All of which, except for the final, are a home and away leg, which is interesting because that means more people get to see that team widespread across Europe as well as the world, but also you get more people coming into your country to see these teams play. So like for example, PSG had played Dortmund like a couple years past, and so you're having German people come into France, and that's like a pretty interesting kind of combination. And seeing those teams play that you wouldn't otherwise have in just domestic leagues.
Lodge, that's interesting. But how about you tell us about your very interesting Champions League nights?
Yeah.
Roll back the clock, open the yearbook. Tell us about it.
Yeah. So when I was in Barcelona, studied abroad. Thank you very much. Did in fact do it. I didn't end up going to a Barcelona game due to COVID. I was at that time when
Wait, you didn't make it to a single game?
No, I made it to it. I made
no
it to a
Champions
game.
League. Okay.
I didn't make it to Champions League game. You know, a lot of classes that I was studying for and all.
Right.
But what I would do was I would go to an Irish pub actually called the George Payne Club, and what it was a bunch of different people across Europe would come in and watch these games without any Spanish bias. And so you would have people from London, people from Portugal, people from all these different countries, and they would come in and be able to watch all of their teams play, all with, you know, cheap fish and chips, pretty half-price Heinekens. It was a great experience. But the best experience that I had at that bar specifically was watching the Atletico Madrid-Liverpool game. That was one where COVID had started to come in, and so fans weren't allowed, as a lot of sports did. But it was one of the original ones, so like right around March, I want to say. And Atletico Madrid ended up winning. And one thing to know about Madrid versus Barcelona, they hate each other in terms of fans. And so having all of the Atletico Madrid fans in one bar that I was at going absolutely bonkers, and knowing that outside, if they were to kind of do any of the celebrations that they were having, there would be riots around them, was pretty funny and pretty cool to see.
Yeah, I like a bit of similar experiences on those Champions League nights, but damn, I it's crazy to think about those rivalries within the specific countries, and just how deep those hatreds go. But yeah, there's nothing like it's kind of akin to like having a Thursday night football game, because the games are played on like Tuesday, Wednesdays. So I don't know, it's just like you're getting out of class or work or whatever it may be, and that's what's on your mind. So
as we're talking about Champions League here, you obviously have a lot of different teams from a lot of different regions in Europe, and I guess the American sport that stands out to me as an analogy for that is March Madness, NCAA basketball, and is that really a fair analogy?
I would say in terms of seeds and in terms of you're having 1 seeds play 16 seeds, 100%. You're getting Victoria Polzin, which is I think like a random Czech Republic team, play Barcelona, play Bayern Munich, like the giants of Europe, 100%.
Also, like the concept of like automatic bids, like you think of like conference automatic bids, that would be like a perfect one, because like a lot of these countries, you just, if you win your little Denmark league, like you're in, and then, you know, for just like say the ACC or the Big Ten, like you're gonna get a few of those good teams, regardless of if they're winning their league. Right. So yeah, that's a great analogy.
Yeah,
explain in NCAA terms. I would just say the nice thing about the Champions League. So Weston McKennie, like I said, he's towed that line, and he's been able to have like a successful career here. But he's been able to play a lot of those seasons in the Champions League, and what that kind of offers for a player, especially like as we look into the World Cup. It's that intensity. It's like Lodge. It's like you and I going to the bar. Like it's a huge deal, almost more so than the weekend games sometimes. The best proxy you could possibly get for like a World Cup.
Yeah.
And so interestingly, a lot of our players have utilized that as it's come to like their own development. So
it's like a springboard for them, actually.
Yeah. So like you think of like, obviously we've talked about how the Champions League includes lots of those Big Ten or ACC teams. The English teams, the Spanish teams. Well, it also includes like 1 or 2 Scottish teams. So some of our players, like Cameron Carter-Vickers, who's a center back, like he actually he went to Celtic Football Club, which is in the Scottish league. But like he gets a game against Real Madrid and 5 other super intense games that can actually prepare him for the World Cup, while at the same time not getting kind of drowned by a super intense, difficult league.
Right. So it's like, for example, Steph Curry, when he was in the NCAA tournament, like that guy did not play really anybody, and everybody wanted to see how he stacked up against like good players.
Right.
In that situation where he just started to play better teams, and you start to see like actual how much quality this guy has.
Yeah.
It's very similar to that.
It's like kind of like I guess to piggyback off that, like a Ja Morant situation with,
Yeah.
you know, he was at a small school and now he's in the NBA with the Grizzlies and he's, you know, one of the top young
He's
young
the guy.
guys in
exactly.
the league.
He's him. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just kind of working your way up. Yeah, so Cameron Carter-Vickers and several other U.S. talents have kind of went that route of give me some Champions League games while also being able to work my way up. So we're going to tap on our betting consultant here for the big Champions League slate, and then kind of sign off for you guys. So.
Yeah. So I hate that this is starting to be the way that we close out every podcast, but it seems like we're getting a little bit into the gambling slate here. What we're going to be talking about at this last kind of segment is the Champions League and a couple of the picks that we have specifically for matchups that have U.S. players playing in. So we're talking about Juventus, as we mentioned with Weston McKennie, Dortmund, which is another one, Chelsea, which we have Christian Pulisic, Celtic, as we mentioned with Cameron Carter-Vickers, a couple of people like that. So Brian, as our resident Champions League expert and betting consultation, I would like you to go through and tell me a little bit about these games, starting with Benfica Juventus.
All right. So assuming Weston McKennie is going to be playing, I'm going to be rooting for Juventus. I think we can all three agree on that. Definitely hope for them to succeed. And that's kind of the only time I'm getting to watch the guy we've talked about on this episode, Weston McKennie.
Yeah.
But Champions League is like the only time I'll be watching Juventus. Right. So probably.
Is there no other way to watch?
Well, I mean, you could stream all
ESPN
these games.
Plus.
Yeah.
Okay.
ESPN Plus has Juventus, where you're going to be seeing, or Paramount Plus is where you're going to be watching the Champions League games.
Are you saying these games or Juventus games?
Yeah.
Just, I mean, I think that we would all agree that even I know the Premier League is the most prominent and seems to be the most watched among, you know, the American soccer fan.
I mean, as an American, any game we're about to mention is very easy to watch. Even if you don't have Paramount Plus, you can go the crack streams route or
not that we're endorsing that.
the buff streams route. But I mean, you can definitely find it if you want to watch it bad enough. So
yeah. I would say we'll probably put up a graphic, or we'll try to look for a graphic for what leagues are on what specific channels. I think that would be a good thing for our producer to do. Not that I'm making extra work for him.
I think that would be great. Because I would have never, you know.
Yeah.
I've seen a few, you know, I have roommates myself that watch quite a bit of Premier League, and when they're watching it, I'll watch along, but I wouldn't know, you know.
Where the hell the games are.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So back to our main point here. Benfica Juventus. What do you think the score is going to be, and how do you think the game's going to go?
I'm just going to say that Juventus should definitely win that game. I know Di Maria got injured recently, but Adrian Rabiot has been playing pretty well. So I'm just going to say Juventus should win that game, and I'm also a big fan of Dusan Vlahovic, who's their main man up top. So, yeah, Juventus should win that game.
Sounds good. Do we have a score?
I'll say 2-1.
2-1 Juventus? Okay, I like it. Next game, Dortmund versus City. Borussia Dortmund versus Manchester City, for those of you watching at home.
I mean, this will be a great game to watch. I know if there's any game on this slate that we're about to mention for the fans at home to watch, it should definitely be this one. I mean, I've liked what I've been seeing with when I have been tuning into Dortmund, so I'm going to give a little surprise and say that Dortmund might bust out a draw against City.
Okay. Calling a draw. I like it.
Isn't Man City pretty much the top team?
They're a wagon. Yeah, they're definitely a wagon. That's a bold statement to make when all of our millions of fans are going to be watching at home. Yeah.
But they did just lose to Liverpool, so maybe they're a little down in the dumps. And,
they could be on a downswing. Yeah, that's a good point. Next game. Red Bull Salzburg versus Chelsea.
Okay. This will also be a good game because Salzburg, just going to fill you guys in, Salzburg breeds stars. So
they do.
If you've heard of somebody named Erling Haaland, he came from Salzburg. They have a striker who is 1 inch taller than the giant that Haaland is, and his name's Benjamin Sesko. Mm-hmm. And he is going to be moving to a big club probably next summer, so keep an eye out on him. And I'm going to say that I'm going to say that, that'll probably be a draw in my opinion as well. Salzburg is very underrated, very young, but they can compete in Champions League. We've seen it before. So, I'm going to go 2-2 draw. I'm going to say Pulisic hopefully gets the start. I'm going to be keeping my eye out on that.
Fingers crossed.
Hope that he gets some time. But, let's go 2-2 in that game.
Sounds good. We got 2 more for you. Dynamo Zagreb, I believe a Russian team, if I remember correctly, and AC Milan, where Serginho Dest, episode coming up on Dest soon, are playing.
Yeah, so AC Milan won the Serie A last year. We've been talking about Juventus a lot this episode with McKennie, and they won the Serie A for I don't know how many years in a row, but AC Milan finally came back to their old ways and took home the silverware, and so they're a pretty good team now. And so I'm going to say they should have no problem winning that game handedly. And so I'll go 3-0 to AC Milan, and keep an eye out on Serginho Dest, of course, and also Rafael Leao. He's also a really fun player to watch.
Another one to watch, yeah. Last game that we're going to be talking about, Napoli FC versus Rangers FC.
This will be an interesting one too. Rangers can compete. I know they went pretty far in the Europa last year, but Napoli is kind of a wagon as well. So I'm going to say Napoli should win this game, and I'll go. I'm going to go 4-1 Napoli.
That's big.
Yeah.
Is that Queen's Park Rangers?
That's not Queen's Park Rangers. Great question, though.
That's a good question.
Great question.
That's FIFA knowledge definitely.
That is,
play.
yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Well,
Because we did rep the QPR Stadium.
We did.
I
was.
I think I had that as my badge for a short time as well. Yeah.
I think they're in first place in the championship right now, actually.
Coming back up. Look
So,
at us.
Keep your eye out on them.
Look at our resident casual knowing a little bit more about soccer than even me, man. How about that?
Come on.
Shouts
I was
from
a novice,
the
but I
Peanuts
was
stand.
serviceable.
But yeah, thank you for the predictions. We're actually going to say a little bit of homework for you guys at home. All of those games and more will be on Golazo Live on CBS Tuesday and Wednesday, starting about 3 p.m. Eastern time. All of the really big plays that are going on throughout those 90 minutes are all happening on one specific channel for 6 different games at the same time. So go ahead and tune into Golazo Live at 3 p.m. On CBS Sports Tuesday or Wednesday.
It's kind of like the Champions League version of NFL Red Zone.
Definitely.
So,
yeah. Lastly, we've been talking about them. For those of you that are diehard American Soccer Crash Course podcast fans, we've been talking about interviews. We're going to get those out, I promise. Our producer's been kind of on my ass, so I'm starting to get the fire lit under me. We're going to be doing those this weekend, so hopefully those will be out next week. But thank you for tuning in. Appreciate all the support, and I think that's it.
All right.
All right. Thanks, guys.